Friends, it's time for us to get started. I want to welcome all of you, and I suggest you put yourself on mute. That way we won't hear any background noise that you may engender. My name is Steve Elkinton, as you can see from my little name tag, and I serve on the local support committee for QVS here in Philadelphia. Thank you for joining today's program, Stories of Service, a panel discussion of some experienced QVS alums. We're grateful to have many friends helping us out today. Our greeters have been Joanne Seaver and Bruce Birchard, so wave your hands, those of you who have been greeters. The tech host is Emily McGrew in the background. She can also wave her hand. She also served as very ably as the clerk of our local support committee. And Laurent Hahn is our chat host, so Laurent, wave your hand. And you'll soon meet our moderator, Claire Hannapel, who's the QVS Director of Development, and the other panelists shortly. This call is being recorded so that folks unable to join us can watch it later. We have also included closed captioning, which should be available as a button on your bar at the bottom of the screen. And if you need to activate it, just press it. If you can't make that happen, go in the chat and ask the tech folks how to do it. So any technical questions, in fact, are best handled through the chat function, also at the bottom of your screen. And hopefully our tech and chat hosts will do their best to assist you. Here in Philadelphia, QVS comes under the loving care of 4 Friends meetings: Green Street, Germantown, Central Philadelphia, and the monthly meeting of Friends of Philadelphia at Arch Street. The opportunity this afternoon to hear stories from a few young adult QVS alumni who live and work in Philadelphia will highlight, we hope, the impact that QVS is having here in our metropolitan region. It is wonderful to see so many of you, so many dear friends, dear to all of us, here with us today. And before we get started, in good Quaker tradition, we'll take a moment to settle in silent worship, and out of the worship, Claire will start the program.
Good afternoon, friends. Hi. So good to see so many familiar faces and some new ones, maybe who I've never met on Zoom or in person before. My name is Claire Hannapel, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's panel. So in just a few minutes, you'll get to hear from the panelists themselves, and we've prepared a list of questions for them. And then at the top of the hour, we'll take a pause, take a deep breath together, and then open up for some Q&A with the audience through the chat box. For those of you who might be new to our community, Quaker Voluntary Service is a fellowship program for young adult friends and spiritual seekers to integrate their spirituality and activism while being supported in developing their passion and purpose. In each of our 5 cities, we bring 6 to 8 young adults together in intentional community. We match them with professional positions at service organizations and provide them with tools to discern their gifts throughout the year. Friends churches and meetings support the local QVS house under their care. And during the year, each fellow is paired with a spiritual nurturer for one-on-one spiritual support, guidance, and growth. Last summer, we hit a particularly significant milestone, having over 200 young adults complete the program. And we're so excited to hear from 4 members of this alumni community who are serving as our panelists today. So we're going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Olivia.
Hi, everyone. So good to see so many familiar faces and unfamiliar ones. My name's Olivia Chalkley. I served during 2017 and 2018 in the Atlanta House. I served at 9 to 5, Winning Justice for Working Women as my site placement. And I'm currently the Young Friends Program Facilitator for Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. And I also serve as the administrator for School of the Spirit Ministries.
Wonderful. Glad to have you, Olivia. It's good to see you. Next, we'll hear from Andrew Huff.
Hi, everybody, and a big shout out to Christina and to Hillary. It's really great to have you both on the call in particular. I use he, him pronouns. I served in 2015-16 in Boston at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program. And I'm now 5 years out of the program, which is pretty incredible. And I work as the senior case manager at Bethesda Project's Church Shelter program for chronically homeless men in Philadelphia, PA.
Amazing. We love shout outs, so please continue to do those throughout the call. We'll hear from Máire next.
Hey folks, so my name is Máire. Like Starry is the mnemonic device for us to, vowels and the letters R and stuff. My pronouns are she and her, which you may not see after the word Starry in my name. I was in Philadelphia for the 2013-2014 year, which feels like yesterday and yet also like a world away because of how important and how much growth I did in that year, but also how much I've grown from that year. My slight placement was Friends General Conference, specifically Ministry on Racism as the Ministry on Racism Support Specialist. And I am at the moment working for actually Blackbaud, a software company that makes software for nonprofits, teaching people how to use some different software solutions.
Amazing. Glad to have you, Máire. And Paloma, our final panelist.
Hi, my name is Paloma Collazo-Vargas. I use she, her. I'm from the 1920s, so I'm the most recent one. And I was placed in Philly, and I had 2 site placements for the first half of the year. I worked for Juntos in South Philadelphia, and then I moved to Nationality Service Center, so NAC for short, and that's where I'm currently working as a case manager for the Bridge to Wellness team, and we work with victims of crime, predominantly from Latin America, so that could be domestic violence or anything under those terms. And I'm also an LSE member.
Yeah, shout out to our LSC. And for those of you who might not know, LSC is a 3-letter acronym that stands for Local Support Committee. It is one of so many acronyms in the world, so I feel like it might be worth sharing that in case you didn't know. So let's kick it off. And I'd love to hear, as much as I can and have prepared, panelists, just a reminder that if there's a particular question that you're led to, feel free to jump on it. But let's kick it off maybe with Andrew. And the question that I'd love to start with is about the service experience at your site placement and how that has impacted you today. And maybe just sharing a story or transformative moment.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned before, I was working at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program at 2 sites, at Mass General Hospital in Boston in their walk-in unit, and also at a day shelter in Dorchester, which is actually, it was just a few blocks from where our QVS house was. And it was work, I had never had any experience with homeless services before. QVS was the first opportunity I had to do that work. And the only reason I was able to start working in homeless services was because QVS trusted me enough to put me in this position and get that direct service. And it was real work. It was real frontline direct service with people in the shelter system and on the streets. And I was grateful to have a lot of wonderful guidance and supervision in doing that work. And a transformational moment that I've really been thinking about recently is there was one woman who was in the day shelter with us who my supervisor, Rachel, and I worked for several months very arduously to get her into specialized housing with support services. And about a month after we had this major achievement and she signed her lease, the woman decided, I think I'm going to move out and move in with my boyfriend, who I've known for a few weeks now, in this tiny room with no lease. And I couldn't believe it. I disagreed with it, but my supervisor said, you can't deprive someone of the right to fail. She is a full person. She's living her life. And our job as her support team is to give her the space to try and possibly fail and welcome her back if she needs us again. And that was a hard lesson to learn, but it was a very important one. And it's one that I've had to continue learning in the work I do now, working with chronically homeless men, where I can say there are people I've worked with for years, and it takes years sometimes for a person to come in from the streets and then move on to housing. There are times when they get to the lease signing and say, I don't think I can do it. And even though part of you on the inside wants to cry, you have to respect that this is a person free to make his own choices, and we're here to support him unconditionally and demonstrate unconditional positive regard, unconditional love, you might say, if you're more inclined. And I don't know if I would have gotten that lesson without the QVS experience. It was a very specialized experience to do that work and get the lesson in a secular context, but have the spiritual context to understand that, oh, what we're doing in social services really is unconditional love. That's another way to look at it. That's another way to interpret it and understand that this is how deep it goes. This is how important it is.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think one thing I hear in that story is a particular image of one type of service. And one of the things that QVS tries to do is work with different types of site placements or service organizations. So I'm curious, Máire, if you'll share a bit more about your experience. You worked with Friends General Conference in their ministry on racism. Like, how did your experience differ? What did you learn about your own vocation? And how has that influenced where you are today?
Wow, ooh, that's rich. And on top of the first question you asked, I have lots of thoughts swirling. So again, I was with Friends General Conference in the Ministry on Racism specifically. So I had gone from being someone who was dipping my toes back into the world of Quakerism. I am descended from Quakers, but was not raised Quaker. And so had not done a whole lot more than be an attending meeting in college, which is, I think, how a lot of young adults that I met at that time kind of also had that as kind of, you know, your first branching out experience. And then suddenly it was full-time Quakerism, nighttime Quakerism, daytime Quakerism. And I thought for whatever reason that from what I knew about the Quakers, if they had a ministry on racism, it must be to go out and fix racism in the world, because we fixed it ourselves. I mean, come on, we were part of the Underground Railroad. Like, it's time for us to just keep on that great work and go and make the world less racist. And in being enveloped in such intentional work of supporting the Religious Society of Friends in a much more complicated topic and a much more ongoing struggle was revelatory for me in one way, in that, like, I had come in with perhaps more of a one-dimensional perspective on the society than I realized at the time, but also was able to really appreciate the intentionality of saying, hey, we've got some work to do, and we're going to put together a ministry on racism. And we're going to do things like support friends across the United States that are affiliated with Friends General Conference in different ways, in being part of their broader communities, providing retreats for friends of color so that there's the opportunity to, be together in an often isolating environment, and to provide opportunities for friends to be able to attend the white privilege conference, which so many people have described as transformational. And I would definitely join in on that as a transformational part of my experience, and appreciating the fact that we are a work in progress. I myself am a work in progress. I didn't have racism figured out. I still don't have it figured out. But I sure learned a lot of tools when I was part of the Ministry on Racism. And I do have like one story if you'd like me to keep going, Claire. I can also hold on to it.
Let's hear it. Yeah, and then we can
Sure.
the rest.
So at the beginning of this year, we had a reflection, I forget what the actual event was called, where people gathered across the country to see, we had been supporting friends to attend the White Privilege Conference for a while, and we're planning on bringing it to Philadelphia, which was actually a lot of the work that I did. So that was very cool. I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with it, to check that conference out. There's a discount yet again for folks who are Quaker. But so kind of assumed, again, like I misassumed when I joined Quakers, like, all right, well, this is a group that gets it. This is a group that's like all about us going to the white privilege conference. So like, of course, we're not going to have any traumatizing experiences. Best famous last words, right? So in the process of being in this large group of 20 or 30 people, trying to figure out what's the best way to move forward, as this is one of the ways that the Ministry on Racism ministers. And one of the participants ended up enacting a role play of behavior that was perhaps ill-advised at the time. And it was certainly ill-advised to attempt to act out this role play with an unconsenting partner sitting next to them in the room. And one thing that really impressed me, because this was the beginning of the year, was how much conflict erupted in that room, but also the way that it was addressed. I was used to, if conflict comes up, you move on to the next topic or you ignore it. But what happened was folks said, I need to process this. Maybe we need to break into affinity groups. Let's table the tasks at hand and not be pushed by the sense of urgency of what's on the agenda, and work on healing as individuals and a community that is here together. And there's no way we can do the things that we set out in front of us if we are in that unsettled and traumatized space. So that was hugely transformational for me, and that was just my first month.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Máire. Before we go on to the next question, well, actually, no, we're going to go on to the next question, but feel free to circle back, panelists, to this rich topic. The next question I had was, how did you and your housemates explore spirituality and interact with Quakerism during your year? And sort of the root of this, the context for this question for those of for the audience is that while service and our site placements is a main priority of the work, we also really want our fellows to engage in community and in the conflicts that arise there and the joys that arise there, and do that work from a spiritual place. Olivia or Paloma, would you all like to respond to this question?
I can take it. Yeah, so I, like Máire, have Quaker ancestry, but didn't grow up Quaker. But then I started going to meeting when I was in high school, and I'm from Baltimore Yearly Meeting, so it's very like unprogrammed. What one of my mentors at Guilford College, Max Carter, would call potluck Quakers, like very community-based, not like there's definitely a spiritual element, but like most of us were there for the community and for the connection and for the like social advocacy parts of being part of a Quaker community. And so after taking some classes in religious studies and Quaker history in college, I was really craving like a deeper connection to spirituality and mysticism and the Christian parts of Quakerism that I didn't really learn about in my unprogrammed meeting. I wanted to like talk about the Bible and liberation theology. And it was really interesting. I'd only ever been in Quaker spaces with other people who were like at the same level of familiarity as I was with Quakerism. So being in a house community with people who were kind of just getting familiar with it, just experiencing Quakerism and Quaker meeting for the first time. It's kind of like when you have a friend from out of town visit you at your hometown and you see everything that you're used to walking by every day in a new light and like through fresh eyes. And it gave me a renewed sense of commitment and commitment and like interest and invigoration about Quakerism that had become just like part of my daily routine. And then, circling back to the wanting to get more in touch with spirituality and Christianity, there were times when I definitely, I think I talked to Liz Nicholson, our city coordinator, about like that kind of craving I was having. And my favorite QVS day, I think Carol Ann Ferlato, who's on this call, came and talked to us, who just graduated from ESR, I believe, and talked to us, went through some Bible passages and just had this amazing discussion about the Bible and Quakerism and the Bible. And really like filled some of what I'd been looking for and led to a lot of great discussions with my housemates. So those are a couple examples. I think I have a much different relationship towards Quakerism than I did before QVS.
Thanks for sharing that, Olivia. And Paloma, that's a bit similar to your experience with your housemates, right? Like traditionally in the house, there's 6 to 8 young adults, and not everyone's Quaker. Not everyone comes with that context. Could you share a little bit about your experience and sort of your house worships and?
Yeah, for sure. For us to, for all our housemates, Melissa, who's actually right now Philadelphia's city coordinator for our current fellows, she was my housemate last year. She was pretty much our certified Quaker of our group. No one else has like doesn't identify as Quaker. I think I probably was also the closest one because I went to Earlham College, and I think a lot of people know that Earlham is considered one of like the Quaker schools. And to be honest, I didn't think Quaker still existed before going to Earlham. I was like, I thought it was more of a history textbook kind of deal. And so going to Earlham really expanded or opened what was Quakerism, because they had Sunday worship, which they still do. I actually attended one last week. One of my old friends, did their worship, and so we didn't know how we were going to do worship in the beginning. We're just like, we're just not going to do it. Like we'll just make something up. But some of us were like, no, we should actually take this seriously. Like this is like, it's in the name Quaker Voluntary Service. We should do something, if not Quaker related, but at least spirituality. And for me, I was more hesitant about it because I grew up Catholic, but I strayed away from it and I became more of an agnostic. And and for me at that point, I considered religion and spirituality as the same thing. And I was like, well, I'm not going to force myself to doing this. Like, even though I decided to do this 1 year. But when we had Lauren, who's in charge of spiritual nurtures, which is where people, sometimes LSC members want to be partnered up with a QVS fellow, and for the whole year, they sort of ask questions about spirituality, help them what's on their journey. It doesn't have to be like at the end of the year they're certified Quaker now. It's just to help them understand where they are spirituality wise. And for me, I had and also a QVS alum who was Atlanta. Their name is Kiwi. And so they were my spiritual nurture, and they helped me on, because Kiwi was telling me that they were on the same boat. And I was telling them, just like, I don't want to do this, but let's do this. And having that time to open up and talk about things, I was able to be more receptive to back at the house, and everyone else was being more receptive. And so we kind of started talking about doing some other stuff. It doesn't have to be quick oriented. Sometimes we would help out at other, I think one time we helped at Green Street, and we did that, or we visited other support meetings that we went to. But a lot of our spirituality that we did, or some of my favorite ones, are just things that aren't considered spiritual, but also they could be. One of the things we did was one that I led was for Dia de los Muertos. I'm Mexican, and so that's an important holiday for me, and I wanted to celebrate that with my housemates. And I didn't really realize how spiritual that could be. Printing out pictures of our deceased loved ones and creating an altar for them that we all participated, and putting it up, and for us to look at it for a very long time and then taking it down. Another one was just having a self-care day. We just decided to buy masks and just do some grounding exercises and meditating. And some of them range into actual, like, what does God, or what is your belief in spirituality? What do you perceive religion or spirituality? And do you believe in a higher power? And what does that look like to you? So it ranged really vastly from just doing a holiday to actually exploring spirituality. And it was nice because it helped me be more comfortable with everyone, because sometimes people consider religion as if you want to fight someone about it, it's something to talk as a conversation that we label that. And it was nice having these conversations with other people who kind of have the same background as me, but also wanted to know more and wanted to have a more of an open experience. And it was really nice that we were able to do that kind of stuff. And in my case, I'm more spiritual. I like doing moments of silence now, and it's something that I look forward to sometimes. And I live with two other alums, and the times that we've had dinner together, I was like, oh, let's do a moment of silence. So it was like, I really enjoy this, and it's really nice that we get to do that. So the practices that we picked up from QVS specifically for me is something that I still want to continue, and it has definitely helped me a lot.
Thanks, Paloma. Andrew, you might want to add to this, and then we can go on.
Yeah, so I came to QVS with very little Quaker background. I did not grow up Quaker. I just had a few friends in college who were Quaker that I admired, and I thought, well, like, they seem really cool. I think I could learn a lot if I did a program like this. And so I say that because I didn't have much experience with worship. And one of the meetings that stood out most to me in Boston was when we actually gathered for worship outside of a factory that produces cluster bombs. And it was a form of worship out in the world, worship as a form of protest. And that really moved me to be able to see that within this community, there's a way that worship isn't just about getting into your head. It's not just about being comfortable indoors with heat, but it's about walking the walk. And going outside into the world, bringing worship with you and taking a stand for something. I still think about that meeting for worship. And then I also spent several Sundays, instead of going to meeting for worship, and God bless Hillary Bergen for supporting me in doing this, I went to a homeless street ministry that was meeting at the same time on the Boston Commons, because I thought, what a great way to explore the spiritual dimensions of my work by gathering for worship with people who are living on the streets, and with the ministers who are out with them every Sunday, doing worship, doing Bible study. And I really cherish the opportunity to extend my work experience into a more spiritual space and worship alongside the people who are also my clients during the work week. And then to be able to bring that home and talk about that and explore Quaker principles in a space that wasn't necessarily explicitly Quaker at all. I had a lot of fun with that, and I grew as much from doing that as I grew from the experiences in the meeting house itself.
What a great story, Andrew. I especially like the idea that worship and spirit can be found outside of a meeting house, and love that story. We're gonna take like we've had some deep, heavy conversations and longer questions, and I'm gonna sort of pause here and ask to venture down this lightning round of questions. We'll see how quick it actually is, with a couple of questions and sort of the ideas, whatever comes to mind first. The first one being, what surprised you about your year? This could be as big or small as you like, and maybe just pass it to the next person. So whoever would like to go first.
For me, it was realizing that I'm not as savvy about communal living and conflict resolution, and that I actually do need more support, more research, more guidance in how to be a better community member.
For me, I think a pleasant surprise was the intergenerational aspect of it. I was definitely expecting to be like my most impactful relationships to be like with people my own age, which I mean, those were really impactful, but just like how involved our local support committee and folks at the meeting were, and how deep my relationship with my spiritual nurturer was, like those were wildly important and so special, and provided me with a lot of incredible role models. And yeah, I don't think I'd ever had intergenerational community in that quite that way before.
I'll say I was surprised by the different ways that we approached Quaker spirituality as a group, from folks with varying groundings and definitions of spirituality, but also Christianity, from more kind of like Christocentric theology, both from a Quaker background and a non-Quaker background, to more agnostic theology. And what really surprised me is where we found communal spirituality as a group, where everyone was able to bring their full selves. It wasn't like one person had to abandon their approach on what Jesus means to them because Jesus means something else to somebody else. That was I was surprised to see so much unity on something that is so often, as I think Paloma pointed out, a point of conflict.
For me, it was how much we grew to really care about each other. I know that's kind of strange sometimes when you're hearing about like community living, but when you're with a group of strangers, a lot of people are more like, I'm just here for a year. We'll see how this thing goes out. That was obviously my mentality. I was just like, I don't know these people and I don't care about these people. But just showing how much we got to carry each other, we became each other's support systems. And then of course, like the pandemic hit. And so that was even such a big part of like why we look forward to living with each other, because there were 7 other people and we didn't go crazy living by ourselves. We had someone to talk to. But just the effort that we put in celebrating people's holidays, religious celebrations, or even just birthdays. We did a whole gala for birthdays starting from March until June. We had a birthday kind of almost every other week, and just the effort that we put into like making their favorite cake, buying a really special gift, and just celebrating like a whole weekend for them. And so that was the most surprising thing, of just like me also wanting to do that, and knowing that it's mutual, knowing that's not just one way. I'm just giving it, but I'm also receiving it.
I love that. I love all these things. Maybe that's my common response. Okay, one more lightning round question is, in your ongoing work in the world, you know, whatever work it is, whether it's, yeah, figuring out how to love and care for your roommates, or how to show up at and be with spirit, or a professional job, whatever work you'd like to define. And what are the two most useful things you gained from QVS? And this time, let's like invite the next person to go. So I'm gonna invite Máire to go.
Sure. So I am currently also on the board of Earthquaker Action Team, which I did not mention earlier, but that is such an important piece of my identity, even though it is avocational, and but that's one thing that I take away from you with Quaker Voluntary Service is no matter what, I have the call, the drive based off of my identity, whatever it might be, having that foundational experience of saying like, hey, we are in this together for community and justice. I'm always feeling determined to do something like that, and also to do it in a way that speaks to my interests and my skills. And I figured out at Quaker Voluntary Service and at my site placement, and through some of the people that I met, both through the site placement and through QVS, what skills I have and how maybe they're like are more aligned with like databases and accounting. So I can have a very fulfilling job and also use skills-based volunteerism to continue creating the world that I want to see.
Do you want to invite someone to go next?
Sorry, I forgot that part. Who looks eager? Andrew, you're smiling.
Happy to go. So the first thing that I got from QVS is confidence that it is worthwhile and legitimate to bring spiritual principles into your work and to seek to make your work into a form of ministry, that is legitimate, it is worthwhile, and is actually necessary. The second thing is a body of knowledge to turn to when I'm feeling lost and need help with discernment or figuring out just what to do. I think especially during the past year with the pandemic, feeling uprooted, feeling discombobulated, knowing that there's a community, there's a set of readings and teachings that I can turn to on those days when I really don't feel grounded, but I want to. There are people and there are teachings that I can turn to that will help me find that feeling. And I'd like to invite Paloma to go next.
A little bit similar to like the second part you were saying, Andrew, learning how sort of turning to someone when you need help, because I was in one placement, I learned about myself, what I actually like learning and what I like to do to help with people. I worked with Latinx community members in South Philly, and that brought so much joy to me and satisfaction that I actually liked waking up and going to work and doing that. And so when that fell through and I was placed in NSC, it was hard to starting all over again while all my other housemates were already in their mid reviews, and I was getting my first review with my new boss, and so I knew that I couldn't just sort of hide in the background and be like, hopefully like they notice me that I need help and they'll come to me. It was more like, Oscar's here, he's here to support me, and my housemates are here to support me, so let me talk to my boss or let me defend myself and let me learn about that. So me learning, growing a backbone in a way. QVS gave me that space, knowing that like if I talked and if there's for some reason a backlash, my city coordinator Oscar, like they would be there to support me and they would come and talk to who would be my boss. That was an amazing thing I was able to learn, and knowing that also my new coworkers will do the same thing if they also find out that there's something wrong going on. That was one of the other things. And then the other, it's not, I think it's funny, but time management. I have been late since kindergarten for everything, my whole life. I personally believe it's a genetic thing because my mom's late for everything. Our whole family's always late for everything. And QVS gave me also the stability of me, like, if I'm late a couple minutes, I'm fine. But being able to talk about that with my boss, and my boss is being okay. Just like, yeah, we're also late, like 15 minutes late. But if you're later than that, we have to talk and stuff like that. And then with my new placement, me talking to my boss and saying like, okay, like, well, you're here as a QVS is also considered like a part-time contract position. And so for me saying like, you know, we understand that you're coming in, like you just graduated. If you want, you can start at 9:15 and then you leave at 5:15. And so having that space to talk about, and me learning how to do time management with my boss and with my work, and creating a good professionalism of getting there earlier, getting there, like, do I have to wake up half an hour earlier? Unfortunately, yes, let's do that. Okay. But also creating that, so having better habits. And but then now flew out of the window because now we're in the pandemic, but that's a different story. But those two things specifically, QVS helped a lot and created that space for me, that net, so where I can mess up and keep on going. And of course, Olivia.
Cool. Yeah, mine's kind of similar to what Paloma just said. Like, I think certain, like, a structure and skill set around professionalism and like, yeah, like I'd never worked in an office job before. I wasn't going to get those skills other places, like not from my parents. Like, I never learned anything like that in college, like how to behave and like dress and act in an office setting. And that's like, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that like people from like a certain class like get handed down and like get taught by their parents, but not necessarily everybody. So QVS was a helpful stepping stone in that sense. Yeah, I think just like general people skills, everyone in my house was very different from me, and everyone I worked with was very different from me. And I definitely like had to interact with people who were different from me before, but in college I'd kind of like self-selected my little group of like social justice types, and learning to not just like get along with, but like love and appreciate people who are like radically fundamentally different from me in like lifestyle and in some cases like beliefs. Yeah, I think that's one of the most useful skills someone can have.
Thanks, y'all. So much wisdom. I am feeling a lot of love for all of you and sharing these stories. And I think we're going to close with just one more of the prepared questions. And then, and so I have to choose which one it is, but who knows, maybe you won't want to answer this. The one I'm thinking about right now, though, is about young adulthood. So QVS is an organization that's focused on supporting and equipping and emerging young adults. And I think y'all have each touched on little pieces of this. But I'm just curious, as like kind of a wrap up of this portion of the panel, what is it like to be a young adult in the world today? And how did the QVS experience meet your needs as a young adult? Feel free to kind of answer that directly or kind of add in little bits and pieces. Would anyone like to take that one first? And then we can pass it around.
I think so for me, I I was so appreciative of being around other folks going through a similar journey and realizing that I don't have to do it all. That's not what it means. We can have the both and of engaging in justice work and being based in a spiritual foundation and be empowered in that, and not have to do every justice thing on the planet, which at least for me, going through 4 years of college made me kind of feel like there's so much wrong. How do I fix it all? But being in this community with folks who are all going through an experience together and engaging in meaningful work in so many different areas and seeing how each of us have skill sets and passions that link up or didn't, right? That's the whole point of the experience, is seeing what works and what doesn't, and being with other people going through that experience and seeing how we can all come together at the dinner table and tell amazing different stories about how we'd grown that day and what our world outside was like, and how very different the work that we had done was, or at least the work that we were trying to do. And realizing that we are all working towards making, the beloved community, creating the world that we want to have. And it's okay to find a piece that works and dive fully into it. Do I have to pick someone?
No, that's okay, Maury. That was such a helpful response. It looks like Andrew wants to add something.
Yeah, I'm thinking now about how QVS is an experience of intentional community. And for me as a young adult, I really valued the chance to be intentional about peer relationships, friendships, actually building community. Like that takes work. Like we don't always realize that those things are hard. And young adults these days, it's hard to build friendships and community. And to realize that we all have our gifts and that community doesn't have to be antagonistic. Like I'm remembering a QVS day where one of my housemates, I resented her because she had very expensive clothes, seemed very materialistic, and we were going to volunteer in a shelter. And I thought, she's going to show up dressed like a supermodel with a latte, and it's not going to work out well. But what happened is she volunteered in the clothing closet and created such an enriching experience for the people who came there because she had such a deep connection with clothing and with brands and with color and with style. And I realized, wow, I've completely judged this person and written her off, but she just brought so much light to the lives of these men and women coming in who care about how they look and want to look well. And she was the perfect person to be in that clothing closet. And to have experiences like that day after day in the house and realize community takes work, friendships take work, and you kind of need a space that acknowledges itself as an intentional community to really have those aha moments and take it seriously. So as a young adult, just as a person trying to have friends and community, QVS really met that need in giving me those insights.
Paloma or Olivia, do you want to share any reflections? Okay.
For me, it's not as, for everyone else, I guess it's not as deep, but for me, it gave me the space to act my age. For me, I am a first generation and I'm the oldest, so I had a huge part in helping with my family. And I always acted a bit older than I should have, and I always became like that mother figure with friends in groups. And I remember that for this year, Earlham had like the biggest group last year, and one of my old friends was just like, your goal for this year is not to be a mom. Like that's your goal. And I was like, okay, whatever you say. But I really took it to heart. And so knowing that, so I took out that space and I was able to act like my age out. Because I'm a homebody, but I didn't realize like how internalized that homebodiness is located into, and where that stems from and growing up. And so I had housemates who were just like, you're young, let's do something. And I was like, I don't know about that. Oh, sorry for the noise. And it was really refreshing being able to act like a 23-year-old going out and going to a bar, and even though I don't drink, but still enjoying myself with others and not feeling that pressure that I have to drink to have a good time, and just dancing around with my housemates and acting my age and talking with them about like relationships and things like that. It's very new to me, and it was such a really great thing of like being able to experience that with people who are my age and others who are also on that same boat as me. Were like, this is my first time being in relationships. Let's talk about it. It's confusing. And being able to still explore that, not as much, of course, when the pandemic hit, but still able to talk about like, what do we perceive relationships as, or what do we perceive love in general. And that was a huge part of me too for my QVS, is just like learning how to love, not only platonically, but also romantically. And it was a really important year of me finally acting my age and enjoying that time, and not being concerned like I'm having too much time and I should be thinking about my family. We're just like, I am in the moment and I'm here, and let's keep on going this. And so everything's on pause, of course, but I guess when things get better is continue with that journey.
Yeah. I'll just add that, yeah, I agree with what everyone said. And yeah, being a young adult is hard, leaving college. I'd become really reliant in college on like on the validation I got from like being a good student. And it was, yeah, suddenly like having that taken away and then just being like, who am I without my grades? I really am grateful that I had the container of QVS to provide me with some structure and some like space to make mistakes, and some really supportive people to like hold me as I made mistakes, and learn that I'm like, yeah, get validation for things other than my schoolwork, and learn what I'm good at besides that.
Thank you all. What a gift you've all given us, is lots to ponder. So if we were in person, if all, let's see, 72 of us were in person, I would invite folks to like take a second, take a breath.
72 people, it's pretty good.
It is pretty good. And I would have you pair up with each other and maybe dig into one or two things that one of the panelists shared. But instead, we're virtual. And here on Zoom, we're going to put you into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes total. And you're going to be able to debrief together. There will be about 3, maybe 4 folks in that group. And if you wish to brainstorm some questions that you have to bring back to the panelists, once we return from breakouts, we'll start an open Q&A. And you can put your questions in the chat. So I think Emily should be all set as our tech host, and we'll invite you into a breakout room, and we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Welcome, friends. I hope you got just a little taste of what this QVS community is all about. And I know it was a short time, but I hope you felt a sense of community. I mean, that's why we're all here. And I'm glad that you were able to connect. So as I was saying before, we're gonna have a little open Q&A. So feel free to jump in the chat box and share a question. Obviously, we've got about 15 to 20 minutes or so before we'll close. So it's not a ton of time. We won't get to every question, but we did receive one question in advance from someone, and Paloma is going to take a stab at answering it. The question is about this sort of polarized time right now. And as one of our most recent alum, Paloma is going to share about sort of that nature of what Paloma encountered in work and how you dealt with polarization.
Yeah, starting out, I guess a bit context. So also the only POC in my year, and that wasn't or at that time I didn't think it was a big deal because I went to Earlham, and Earlham is also predominantly white. But Earlham is a liberal school and it's a Quaker school, and so everyone has sort of the understanding of we're all either very far left or socialist and Marxists. And so it wasn't difficult having conversations with people talking about politics or anything of that regard. And I enjoyed having those conversations about race and sexuality and everything what's considered political. And it was easy. But coming to QVS and being with a bunch of strangers who I didn't know, I was missing out those conversations that were sort of natural to have. I didn't have those conversations with my housemates in the beginning until an old friend of mine came to visit me for Thanksgiving. And when she stayed with me, we went back to those conversations again. And I remember telling her, just like, I forgot how invigorating it is to have these conversations about politics, especially what's going on, because I'm an international studies major, like that's what I studied. And so politics is a huge part of my life. And when I was talking to my friend about that, I was afraid about if one of my houses had an opposite opinion, and how would I be able to live with them, and how would I have the conversation about politics and just in general what's polarizing. And one of the things that QVS has is one of their workers is Zenaida, who comes in from city to city and talks to the POC or queer fellows, and they check in on how we're doing. And so I felt comfortable with talking to Zenaida about that. I was like, my friend came and I kind of miss having that conversation, and I don't know what to do. I'm afraid of creating unnecessary conflict. It was like, the whole point is we're all trying to live harmoniously. It's like, and I don't want to start something. And they brought a really good perspective of like, well, like, I think you should have this conversation, and if everyone's acting how they should be like adults, like, you guys can come to a common ground, and you won't be afraid of like, or you won't be walking on eggshells when you want to talk about something that's important to you, because like it's your life, like your life is politicized, like you need to talk about it. And so on that same day after a talk with Zenaida, we were having dinner, and they're like, how was your talk with Zenaida? And I was like, oh, I'm like, it was okay. And then I started shaking because for me, when I get anxiety, I start to tremble, and I was like, but and so it was me talking. I was like, like, I've noticed that I haven't been able to have these conversations with you guys because I'm afraid about what your guys' opinion is. I was like, I think having my friend and knowing that it's not, it's like, I thought it was because I wasn't as political because I graduated, but it was more just like, I just didn't feel comfortable talking about with you guys. And I don't know how to have these conversations. And last time we had a sort of a conversation, it became an argument for a QVS day, which is what we do every other Friday with with the fellows, and we do something centered about Philadelphia or our site placement. And I was like, and that didn't turn out well, and a lot of us didn't feel confident anymore, and it didn't like there was an argument. And so for me to talk to them, like, and so I'm afraid, I was like, I don't know where your political stance is, and I'm afraid of talking about it. And it wasn't an issue for my workplace, because I worked with, especially at the time, because it was Juntos, we share the same ideals, and because a lot of us came from the same background of like upbringing, stuff like that, and so we had the same view. So I was comfortable at workplace. It was interesting that my house situation at that point was just like, I don't know how to have this conversation. And it was really refreshing that I was like, thank you for sharing. Like, I guess it's like, that's another privilege that we didn't really realize, is that like the way that we don't talk about politics, and you're afraid about talking about it because you're afraid of that repercussion of it. And so like we'll have more conversations, and like, but we also want to create a space where that you want to talk about it. Like you say, you study it, like what you know about international law and politics. And after that conversation over dinner, which I feel like at the time, man, I shouldn't have this during dinner. Like, this is our break, but making it an informal environment, but having such an interesting conversation really eased it for me. And it became more comfortable. And I had a housemate who was just like, like, I want to talk about politics too. So like, we should talk about it. And I was like, yeah, like, let's talk about that. And it was from there on, it was nice knowing, like, seeing that I know that my housemates share around the same values that I do, the same alignments, and able to have those conversations and being comfortable. I think that was the biggest part, like being comfortable and having these conversations. And if there was a disagreement, talking about it and making sure that it doesn't escalate to an argument. So that was a really important moment that I hadn't thought about until that question came up.
Thanks for digging into that. I mean, I heard so much in that. You were sharing about one of the structures of QVS, about the house meals as being like a container for community and togetherness and discussions and debriefing our days. And I also heard pieces about equity, and I saw a question in the chat about what does QVS do to support and further equity and inclusion, and having Zenaida as a staff person to check in and sort of wear that hat and really steward our equity work, I know was really impactful for you, Paloma, and many of our other fellows. So I'm grateful for that story. I also saw a question in the chat, and mind you, friends, we're not going to get to all of them. So I hope that you continue to reach out to us so that you can get all these answers. But one friend asked about whether QVS exposes participants to things like clerking and discernment. And I wondered if any of y'all wanted to share a bit more about your house meetings and some of that learning around clerking and Quaker process. Yeah, Olivia.
Yeah, that was one of the most like practically useful parts of QVS for me. I think our first QVS day, we did a workshop on clerking with Marianne Downey, hi Marianne, and her husband, and we took that process into all of our house meetings. And another, yeah, and we were all like, I would say at least one or two of us went to business meeting at Atlanta Friends meeting when those happen monthly. So we were exposed to it that way as well. And we also had a lot of experience with clearness committees, and that was something I'd participated in a couple times before QVS in my like high school youth group, but it had been a while, and it's really different when you're an adult to have a clearness committee, and especially as we were transitioning out of QVS and into our next phases and we're all making a lot of decisions. It was really helpful to be able to support each other in that way. And we've even had clearness committees like over Zoom with our housemates a couple of times since our QVS year. And that's, yeah, it's just such a important, useful tool, something I love about Quakerism that I got to explore more in QVS.
Thanks, Olivia. The third question that friends were wondering, this might be a combination, is how do we improve the way that QVS Fellows get to know their local support meetings in each of the cities? You all had different experiences getting to know local friends, and how can the meetings get to know fellows within the first couple months? Obviously, the world looks a little different, and I think we're all trying to ask that question of how do we be in community with each other. But I think the QVS experience is unique. So would anyone like to shed some light about those connections, or a particularly transformative moment you had getting to know a local friend? It's a big question. Maybe I'll start by actually sharing some wisdom that I once heard from an alum from the very first QVS year in Atlanta. And she is now our board clerk, Allison Letts. And she shared when we were first expanding to the Twin Cities. Friends there were asking the very same question. How do we be in relationship with these young adults doing this program? What's the best way? And she said, get to know them on an individual level and become friends with them on an individual level. Don't seek them out as the house, the QVS house or the QVS Fellows. Just like as a fellow myself, I wanted to get to know Atlanta Friends Meeting as an Atlanta Fellow. I had to get to know an Atlanta friend. And so I think that would be my recommendation. I just took that question, but I wondered if anyone else has thoughts about that, about building relationships like that.
I think everything you just said, Claire.
I can go again. I know I just talked. But a couple of things are, Atlanta Friends Meeting has a newcomers potluck once a month. That would be a lot of potlucks. Once a month, where new people to the meeting and just anyone who attends the meeting can come, and a different household hosts it every month. And I think our second month in the program, we hosted it at our house, and that was a really great way to get to know people in the meeting and like have one-on-one conversations and all share food together. I think like making new friends happens best over food. So we all ate deviled eggs and chatted. It was really nice. And then we like kept going back to those newcomers potlucks most months. And yeah, I really lucked out with my spiritual nurture. She's like the coolest person ever, Jennifer Kramer Dickey, an Atlanta Friends Meeting. So I always wanted to hang out with her. But I had another example. Oh yeah, there was one woman in Atlanta Friends Meeting who just, I don't remember what her tie to QVS was exactly, but she had every single one of the fellows over to her house for a one-on-one dinner at some point during our year. And that was really sweet. And like, yeah, I remember like asking her for like career advice and romantic advice, and she made me some nice soup. So I feel like that was really, I always felt really held and cared for by the meeting because of those one-on-one things.
Thanks, Olivia. Let's close with this question, and anyone's welcome to answer it. And then Bruce will close us out with a final closing. So this question is, can you share an inward nudge or leading you're experiencing now and how you're feeling about it?
I can talk about that. So I've been going through a process of discernment, to figure out what do I do next? How do I take the work that I'm doing, the lessons I learned in QVS to the next level? Because I transitioned right from QVS and Boston Healthcare for the homeless program to my current job, working in homeless services in Philadelphia. And I'm trying to get clarity about graduate school, about social work in a local context, in a global context, and I'm not sure. One of the joys, though, has been having QVS to turn to and say, Claire, I need some help figuring this out. Are there other alums who have gone through this process? And having Carol Ann be on the team now to have an alumni coordinator who can say that the QVS process, the QVS community doesn't just end once you finish your fellowship year, that you leave one kind of community, but you enter into the alumni community where you have a wide pool of wisdom and life experience and people to turn to who understand the QVS experience and the perspective it gives you on life and work. So I'm feeling a nudge, but more exciting than the nudge is knowing that I have a space and a group of people that can help me go through discernment, because it's a slow process and it takes time and it's hard to do alone. So it's just another reason I'm grateful for QVS, is that it's not just the year-long fellowship that you get, but you get to enter into this lifelong community where the support continues to grow and you continue to have these people to lean on when you're making life transitions and life decisions. It's really wonderful.
Thanks so much, Andrew, for sharing about that nudge. Any other quick nudges that should be named?
I have a quick nudge that I'm excited by. This is an exciting time for Earthquaker Action Team as we're engaging in a long ongoing campaign and evaluating what it means to be in the long game. And I am perhaps being nudged, not necessarily forward, but really trying to hold the weight of being mindful in an important decision making process of remembering what it's like to be in community, whether it's a large volunteer-led organization or a house of 7 people, and always take the time to take the breath and then move forward. And I hope that I can practice that in a way that is true to the growth that I believe I made as a member of QVS.
Thank you, friends. We're going to invite Bruce Birchard, who's a member of our local support committee in Philadelphia, to close us out. And looks like he might be spotlighted soon. Bruce, where are you?
I'm here. What do I need? Can people see me and hear me? I have no idea. Okay, great.
Yes, yes.
Well, this is so exciting for me. You have to realize, I first was exposed to this idea, Quaker Voluntary Service, when I first met Christina Repoley, which I think was 2004. And Christina, I'm going to ask you to say something really briefly in just a moment. But that was a long time ago. That was 17 years ago. I was young then. Well, I wasn't as old as I am now, that's for sure. And you know, I've said to many of my friends that being part of starting Quaker Voluntary Service and just seeing it grow and meeting people and so on, it's been one of the very most exciting things I've done in my life. So this has been terrific. It's just been wonderful to be in this online community today. And there are so many people on this call, in addition to the panelists and the staff, who have played an important role in so many different ways to help get Quaker Voluntary Service going and to give us ideas and suggestions and to help it to grow. So just enormous appreciation to all of you. It's been wonderful. Christina, I'm hoping you're still on the call. Can you just in 30 seconds or so give us help me with these closing words in terms of your reaction to all this that we've been doing today?
Sure. Hi, Bruce. Hi, everyone. I join Bruce in just my admiration and awe at how QVS has grown in the past, what was that, 17 years? I was young then too. And I remember, Bruce, I remember one of the first grant proposals you and I ever wrote for QVS. We were like, in 15 years, there's going to be 200 young people who have been formed and shaped by Quaker Voluntary Service. And when we wrote that, I think we were like, that seems like a pretty big, grandiose vision to put forward, but let's go for it. Let's put it out there. And so I think when you said that today, that we had, Claire, I think you said there are 200 young adults who have been through QVS now. That was what struck me. It was like, wow, this really happened and we really did it. And so many of you made this possible. And it's just so exciting to hear from alums who are now many years out of this program to see what a transformative impact indeed this experience has had for you all, for all the communities that you're part of, and for our Quaker community. So thank you all so much to these brilliant and wonderful alumni who have been with us today, and just know that there's 200 of them out in the world and in our Quaker communities having such a big impact. And thank you, all of you who have been part of supporting this project. So many people.
Well, and thank you. We can give a little applause here to Christina. You can't probably hear it, but we can all say, Christina, your vision, it's just terrific. Okay, so many more people to thank. The one other I want to mention, but unfortunately, I saw in the chat he got off the call, is John Helding. As we organized ourselves into the first board of QVS, John agreed to be our clerk, and he served as clerk for 6 or 7 years. And John brought tremendous experience as a consultant and even from business school. And oh my goodness, he was so important to creating Quaker Voluntary Service. At any rate, so thanks so much to Paloma, to Andrew, to Olivia, to Máire. Just it's wonderful hearing from you. And then of course there's Claire. Thank you, Claire. Everybody understands Claire was a QVS fellow, and now she's a QVS staff person, and she is going places with QVS, and we appreciate that so much. Thanks to Steve, whose idea I think this originally was. And yeah, well, thanks to everybody. Thanks to the local support committee too. If you want to make a contribution to QVS, well, yeah, that'd be great. We appreciate that. We agreed that wasn't what this was all about. It was a chance to get together with people who care about or want to learn about QVS, but you can make a contribution, and you can go to the Quaker Voluntary Service website, and I think there's something in the chat also about how to do that. And also there are ways to volunteer time. It's particularly obvious if you live near a city or in a city where there's a local program, but there are other ways as well. We'd love to hear back from folks. Appreciate any input, ideas you have. I think that's about it. It's 5:30. I want to say thank you again. Thanks for joining us. This is a wonderful community of people. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.